Morning, everyone. And what an enthusiastic start to the morning that was. That's really good. I have to try and follow that now, so that's really good. So it's great to see people in person again. Anyone that saw me last year will have realised that lockdown's been pretty tough on me. I've gained some weight and lost some hair. But aside from that, we're all good to go this morning. So again, great to see you all. So I've got the absolute pleasure this morning of hosting a panel on the Manchester fintech sector, which I've now been working here in Manchester in this sector for the best part of 3 years. And having come from Leeds and not really supposed to be like in Manchester, I must say I've taken you guys to heart. And the fintech sector over here is really exciting. So with a fantastic panel this morning, I'd like to pass over to the guys to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into some questions and discuss the sector in more detail. So Anish, I'll start with you as you're sat next to me.
Yeah. So hi everyone, great to be here, and like you say, great to actually see people, real people in person. So for those of you that don't know about Access Pay, so we're a business that's about 9 years old now. We were born in Manchester, and really what we're trying to do is we're trying to reinvent the way in which banks deliver corporate banking services to their larger customers, so corporates and enterprises. And to do that, we're having to basically sort of change what has been a very manual process where people are still literally logging onto online banking and manually uploading payments and downloading statements and all this kind of stuff. We're having to digitize that, and then off the top of that, we can then enable new kinds of financial services to be delivered. And so we're doing that in relation with a number of the biggest banks, not just in the UK, but also globally. And we're also partnered with some very, very large global financial institutions that unfortunately I can't name because we're under NDA, but a lot of exciting stuff going on, all of which is driven by our team that is based here in central Manchester.
Great stuff. Thanks, Anish. We're also joined by Janine Hurt this morning from Innovative Finance. Janine, could you give us a brief intro?
Hi, yes, thanks everyone. I'm CEO at Innovative Finance. We are the industry body for UK fintech, bringing together the startups, the scale-ups, those innovating at the large incumbents, and working with government, regulator, and policy makers to transform financial services and make them more transparent, democratic, and effective for all. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Janine. Thank you. We've also joined this morning by David Gardner from TLT. Morning, David.
Morning, Mark. Delighted to be here. My name's David Gardner. I'm a partner at TLT. We're a law firm with offices around the country, but I'm based in the Manchester office, and I'm the head of the fintech team at TLT. So we specialise in advising all sorts of different players in the fintech market, from big banks to small startups to new fintech providers, on the changing landscape and how they need to contract and comply with regulation. So I'm very happy to be on this panel today with the other speakers.
Thanks, David. You're very welcome. And Marcos from Allianz Manchester Business School. Morning, Marcos.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Sorry I can't see everybody, and I wish I would be. I was able to be there. So my name is Marcos Zacharias. I'm a faculty member at Allianz Manchester Business School, which is at the University of Manchester, not very far from where you are. My mission, essentially, and our mission at the business school, is to create an ambitious research and teaching agenda. So we want to educate and train the next generation of people in financial services, from regulators, startups, bankers, analysts, and so on and so forth, but also to do research around fintech, around the role of technology in finance, and understand what are the effects at many different levels, looking at it from many different sides, both in the economics, management, innovation, psychology, sociology, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a great pleasure to be part of the discussion.
Excellent. Thanks, Marcos. And I'm Mark Robinson, surprisingly. I'm from Verlang. We're a UK-based corporate insurance broker, and at Verlang I head our fintech practice out of Manchester. So let's get down to some questions then and figure out what's going on in the fintech sector here. So we're obviously a year on since the last Trailblazing Tech, where a big theme last year was what changes were businesses going to be making in response to COVID, the pandemic. I guess many of the changes that businesses were looking to implement last year, I guess at the time were originally planned to be short term. But I guess now those short-term plans have probably moved towards more of being the new normal as opposed to just short-term, bridging the gap of what we needed to get done. So an open question to everyone really to start with. In terms of your own businesses and other businesses you interact with, what changes have you seen in the past sort of 12 to 18 months in response to the pandemic?
Want me to kick off?
Sure, please.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. We've seen a huge change. It's interesting. So when we started our business, like sort of 9 years ago, we would go to organisations and say, hey, you know what, the way that you're doing things is inefficient, involves lots of manual processing, you could automate it. And they would go, well, you know what, yeah, we could do it, but you know what, it works, so we'll kind of just leave it. That all changed 18 months ago. And what we've seen is now pretty much every business is kind of looking at all of their operations saying, right, we've got to be more efficient because probably, revenue's dropped and we have to think about this kind of new normal, as it were. And so, that's forcing them to look at automation, use of technology, etc. And so we've seen that, very directly with customers that we engage with, but also through the banks that we work with, where those banks, again, even just 3 or 4 years ago, they were very much happy with just letting their customers, have to manually, if you like, get data to the bank and out of the bank. And now all of those customers are going to the bank and saying, this is unacceptable. We have to have some sort of automation here. You have to allow us to integrate in some way. And so we've now seen the banks kind of coming to us saying, hey, look, we've literally got thousands of customers who want to change the way they work, and we are not geared up to support that. So all of that shows us this just huge change. I mean, literally, it's like someone flicked a switch compared to the way things were 18 months ago.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, some of the figures that are out there in terms of that, I mean, obviously the pandemic has massively accelerated digital adoption. I think I read the other day something like now 71% of people are now using the services of at least one fintech. So I guess just keeping that question open, guys, and maybe adding another layer to it. Is it still viable now for a business to be a fully physical business anymore, or is that now completely out the window? Are we now just looking down the barrels of full-on digital online businesses? Sure, go ahead, yeah.
I'm happy to jump in there as well, because I think we've spoken to a lot of our members, from startups through to scale-ups to large institutions. And I would say that we've seen really a variety of responses. I think if you're an early stage fintech, there's some benefit of not necessarily needing to pay for some physical space. But at the same time, the majority of members that we've spoken to really very, very much value that in-person engagement. And also particularly when you're looking to brainstorm, innovate, new ideas, it's quite hard to replace that in-person aspect as well. I wanted to just also briefly touch on the question from earlier with regards to how has the last 12 or 18 months really impacted the sector, because from our perspective, one area that has really developed or accelerated has been a recognition of how important fintech is to our broader society, and the role that fintech can play when we talk about financial inclusion, when we talk about financial wellness as well. Even if you look at over the course of the COVID and the pandemic, the C bills and the B bills, the distribution of those loans, the role of alternative lenders was really highlighted. Funding Circle, for example, I think distributed more than 25% of all of the C bills loans. So there has been an acceleration or an accelerated recognition of how important fintech is to our lives and our daily day-to-day ongoings as well.
Yeah.
Add to that as well, if I may. I think there is absolutely, I'll agree with everybody, there's recognition that the pandemic has accelerated for many financial institutions, particularly incumbent ones, further programs with digital transformation. And everybody kind of realized that obviously we have to take this more seriously. One piece that we co-authored as part of the World Economic Forum, because what I didn't mention perhaps in the beginning, I'm also sitting at the Global Future Council on Financial and Monetary Systems. So we do a lot of analysis of the trends and trying to identify what are the next 5 to 10 years in financial services. We kind of wrote an article with our team, identified the need for a phygital strategy. And what a phygital strategy is essentially is the need to realize that digital is not just an extra channel you create. It's something that needs to be very much embedded in your business strategy. And whatever digital solution you have, it must kind of seamlessly kind of be embedded in physical interactions. And I think now with the pandemic, it kind of people realize in financial services that digital potentially must be first, the first channel of communication, and then it be utilized in many physical settings so that you avoid obviously further kind of interaction. We also talked about the isolation economy. At that time we had all the lockdowns, essentially everybody was locked into their homes, but isolation economy means that people would be more selective as to what kind of physical destinations in the future they'll be going to, and that could be a branch of a bank, that could be other settings within financial services. So the more we can embed digitally and make use of technology, the better. And of course, fintech has a lot of solutions on that. Fintech is really good paradigm for all financial institutions to kind of follow up on certain solutions.
Yeah, I think that certainly rings true for me as well, Marcos, in terms of the change that we've seen in terms of our own business, the way we work with clients, and the instructions that we're getting around fintech. The fact that people couldn't be in the office, but still need to collaborate, still need that connection, and how do you achieve that? And also that kind of tension between understanding that everyone can work remotely and everyone can do things via Zoom, via Teams, but actually you miss something unless there is that direct connection, unless there is face-to-face interaction. So I think everyone is now working towards their hybrid working model, about how they will continue to engage with their clients, their customers, their team members. And that certainly plays through in how we've been working with our clients who previously would have come into our offices by default, but now we have to work out how to speak to them, how to engage with them, how can they sign documents remotely, how can we manage documents outside of paper form. All of those things were in play. Obviously, the solution for a non-paper document is not novel, but many people still used paper documents and suddenly they couldn't. Many people still physically signed documents and suddenly they couldn't meet to do that. So we're certainly seeing that change where businesses are working out how to align themselves with that new reality. And I think the elastic has been stretched out for long enough now that it's unlikely to snap back to how things were, because everyone has become used to this way of working, realises opportunities and realise that there's challenges to make it as effective and efficient as we used to work before. And from a fintech perspective, you're absolutely right that the solutions that we're seeing all point towards a model that can support remote, digital, mobile working and interaction between financial service institutions and technology providers and customers. So fintech is absolutely sort of front and centre of that agenda, and we'll probably come on to talk about the Khalifa review in a minute, but I think that again was a really useful document to kind of crystallise a lot of those themes and indicate that there's strong support from a government perspective for fintech driving forward the economy and the changes that we're seeing in how business works.
Yeah, excellent. And you've really fantastically led me into the Khalifa review there. It's almost like that was planned. It was absolutely fantastic. So if we touch on the Khalifa review, so we know obviously it was an excellent report, and from that review, one of the major upshots of that was that the fact that we now have proof that the UK is a dominant force in fintech. We take a 10% market share of the global fintech space. It generates about £11 billion worth of revenue in the UK. Now, we've mentioned that we've kind of mentioned that fintechs are going to get busier because of the way things are. The report tells us that 67% of the UK's fastest growing fintechs consider that talent is a top priority, and we do these conferences, and talent and skills gaps always comes to light. So if we look back to 2020, the data in 2020 showed us that in terms of skills gap, 43% of adverts were seeking people with data skills, 44% of adverts were seeking people with technology skills, and 35% were seeking people with business skills. So I guess, again, Anish, coming to you as a business owner in the space, is this skills gap, is this talent, I don't like to say talent shortage, but is this talent, I'm going to say it anyway, is this talent shortage, is that something that's affecting access pay? And if so, what are the kind of plans to deal with it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's our biggest issue is recruiting the right people fast enough. So it's interesting, a couple of years back, we'd probably be sitting here saying, well, actually, the thing holding back growth might be access to capital. That's absolutely not the issue anymore, right? I mean, access to capital, there is a lot of capital out there. The issue now is getting the right people. And so, as I talked about what we do and what we're, if you like, the tsunami of demand coming our way, our issue is that there isn't enough people in banking that do what we do. So even if we recruited all of them, that still wouldn't be enough to cope with the demand that we're facing. So we figured out that we're going to have to train like a whole new, if you like, generation of people, if you like, who are able to do, this kind of digitization or I suppose operate the kind of fintech service that we deliver. And so a big part of our focus now is investing in, right, how can we recruit and then train, the right type of individuals, they've got the right mentality, they're willing to learn. I don't think any of us now can just pick people off the street and go, right, this individual 100% matches the criteria for the role. I think it's down to all of us fintechs. That's our next big challenge, is creating the next generation of sort of employees. Yeah. And again on the same note, Janine, I think in terms of talent, I think something like, is it 46% of the fintech ecosystem in the UK are from overseas? And I know that you guys have done some work on that. So how can we continue to access that talent? Does Brexit and regulatory uncertainty affect that? Is there something that we can do to continue to access that talent?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting question, and you're correct. So it's around 46% of the ecosystem comes from outside the UK, around 28%, from the EU. So I think as we move forward, it's absolutely crucial, firstly, as was just mentioned, that we develop a pipeline within the UK, but also that we continue to be able to access that great talent coming from all over the world. So we very much welcomed the Chancellor's announcement earlier this year around the scale-up stream for the visas in terms of accessing the talent, and we've worked across the ecosystem to feed into some of the requirements around what that scheme will actually look like and how it can benefit startups and scale-ups as they grow, because it's absolutely critical that we make sure that we continue to be able to bring in the great diverse talent that's coming from all over the world as we move forward. And I think that also essentially moves us to this conversation around the power that fintech has when we look at the UK's soft and hard power, as we look to recreate our identity as global Britain going forward. This is a real area of attraction. It's an opportunity to bring people from all over the world. We have some of the best universities in the world here across the United Kingdom, so there's really a natural affiliation there as well.
I think that also plays into very much kind of a more local Manchester issue as well, because Manchester specifically has got some of the best universities, some great businesses, fantastic links from a transport perspective, an infrastructure perspective. There's a lot to recommend Manchester and the Northwest as a destination, and the challenge, I guess, is to realise that and make sure that in the immediate term, Anish and others have got the pipeline of available talent they need here and now. But I think it's also a much longer term play as well, to think about how we're structuring education, not just at degree level, but prior to that, and thinking about how we talk to school children and looking at this as a 5-10 year strategy, because otherwise the danger is we're always going to be hand to mouth trying to find what limited talent is available. We're slightly different because we're a law firm, but we have recruitment challenges as well. There's not a huge amount of lawyers that are expert in technology, let alone expert in fintech. So that's something that we can hunt around for the available talent today. But what we need to make sure is that the best talent is actually coming through in a pipeline tomorrow and the next day.
Yeah, and I guess the Allianz Manchester Business School, Marcos, I guess you guys, well, I know you guys are up on this and you've got various courses available. What's the viewpoint from where you're sat?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly where we come in with our agenda. So we have, and I understand that the skills issues is very important, but I have to also highlight that it's very important at many different levels, right? So you have, of course, undergraduates who have zero experience from the industry. You have MSc programs who have perhaps 1 or 2 years from the industry, have already done their bachelor's degrees. And then you have MBAs or even more experienced candidates who have been, obviously in the industry for a few years, and they have the need to kind of understand again or reskill them in a sense that they appreciate more the use and the role of technology in financial services. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're developing different electives across all these degrees, across all the different levels of education. So as of I think a couple of years ago already, we have undergraduate elective, for example, on fintech for people who study finance, accounting, and these kind of degrees. Last year, we developed for the first time our flagship fintech kind of elective as part of the MBA, and we had a tremendous response. This year, I think we're running this session 2 or 3 times for the entire MBA cohort. There's an increasing interest of people to understand more and appreciate fintech. And we're developing, we finished developing one course which will be taught across our data science business analytics program, so 2 master's degrees there around the financial data analytics and artificial intelligence in finance from one of our new hires who specializes on AI and big data analytics. And we're developing 2 or 3 more courses, at least 2 for next year, upon many different degrees, and also just finished and launched a new executive education program or fintech to capture the market of kind of the more experienced segment in the economy. So I think there is, obviously there is need across all these levels, and I think this is the kind of pipeline we need to have in academia in order to serve the needs of people like Anish, for example, right? So, and we definitely welcome communication with companies. We definitely kind of want to have close engagement with the industry, collaborate with the industry, and there's so many ways to do that. So we kind of welcome everybody from the fintech side to want to engage and collaborate on these kind of training education programs.
Excellent, fantastic. I'm mindful I've got a big red timer flashing at me. So we could go on for another hour quite easily, which would be fantastic for me, but probably not for everyone sat in front of me. So there's a couple of other things I would have liked to get into, but sadly we're running out of time. So I'll kind of sort of hit the Khalifa review again. So in the review, albeit Manchester wasn't specifically singled out, instead they opted for a regional cluster and called it the Pennines, which I think was their nice way to include me because I'm from Leeds, so we all got involved in there. And I know it's early days, but I guess in the final few minutes, if everyone's got a comment for this, have we seen any immediate effect on Manchester from that fintech report? Is it too early? Are there green shoots coming through from that report as to what we can do to improve? What's everyone's thoughts on that, I guess, to close?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean, obviously the report's only recently come out, so we haven't seen, I think, a sea change or anything in the last couple of weeks or months. I think, to be honest, we've if I sort of think back a couple of years, we've recruited people, who live on the other side of the Pennines, and equally we've recruited people in Liverpool. So I kind of think we're kind of operating that way anyway, if you see what I mean. So I don't see it as that big of a shift. Quite whether the 3 towns will, or the 3 cities, if you like, will combine and think of themselves as one combined entity, I think is a whole different issue, right? So, but practically, I think we've been probably, us and other businesses have been operating that way for a long time.
Yeah, thank you. Any other thoughts, guys?
I think from my perspective, the Khalifa report was really good PR for the UK fintech sector, and it's got everyone talking, which is great. There's a lot of recommendations in there about various different themes. As you say, Mark, we'll maybe continue this afterwards for another couple of hours, but probably not for the sake of everyone else. But I think the themes around developing digital IDs, continuing to progress open banking, open finance, and the clustering around the country and actually collaboration between clusters to make it a more national programme. I think those are going to take some time to really play out. But I think the first thing the report did was really put fintech back on the map and put it into a national conversation. And I think it really identified opportunities for all of us to think about where we can take it next. So I don't necessarily see that we've realised all of that, but I think it's a much longer term, a much more forward-looking report and much more longer term. I would be interested in your views on the Pennine cluster as a concept, given your aforementioned Leeds and Manchester connection. What you think about that?
Yeah, sadly we're out of time, so I can't comment at all. So I'll take that offline with you in a room full of people from Manchester. I'll keep that to myself. Thank you. But look, guys, I'm really sorry, but we have run out of time. As I say, I could quite happily sit here with all of you and continue this conversation all day. But for now, I'd like to thank you all very much for your time this morning. It's been fantastic, and I hope to see you all again soon to continue the discussions. And thank you everyone for listening. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mark. Thank you to all of you for taking part in that discussion. Our next panel discussion will be delving into the world of cybercrime and data protection, and will be hosted by Martin Bryant from The Big Revolution. But just before we go to the panel, just because we've not had enough of Mark yet, we've got a little video from him and our sponsors, Vilang.